But as I like to say, something is better than nothing when it comes to sources. So here's one, my aunt wrote a book recently that I edited for her. And this is the way she did her source citations. That stands for the Charlotte Observer, and the date of the newspaper and the page of the newspaper. And I had talked to her about those big fancy citations, and she wasn't going to have it. She said, no, I'm not doing that. And no, I'm not going to have you do that either. So this is what she's willing to do. And I was happy with that. I said, at least she's doing something. Because the reader will say, oh, okay, she got it from that newspaper. And then at the beginning of the book, she has a list of what that means. So you can always do that. And so for your example about your recollection, you could do in brackets, author's recollection. That way people will know where that came from.
Yeah, but they can't find any supporting judgment.
And that's okay too. I mean, at least you've done something and it's made sense. Something is better than nothing when it comes to writing these family histories. All right. Layout and design guidelines. Okay, now this is, again, this is your book. You do it the way you want to do it. I'm going to just give you some easy ways that you can jazz up your book, make it look a little bit more professional and polished. And I try to keep it within what Word will allow you to do. And let's see how this goes. Okay, so photographs, obviously, and artwork. Who is going to have photographs in their book? Almost everyone. Thank you. That's what people are going to want to see. They're going to be flipping right through that to see what photographs you have. But in the case of my great-great-grandmother, I've got maybe 2 photographs of her. I don't have anything else, so what else am I going to put in there? Am I just going to have big blocks of boring text that no one is going to read except for me? No. I'm going to get some maps from the 1860s, from her town in the 1860s. I'll include some maps. Even 20th century maps are interesting. Like for the man I was talking about before, maybe a map from the 1920s of where he was farming in Santa Clara. That would be really interesting to put in there because Santa Clara certainly has changed since he was doing all that. Images of records. Got a little immigration card there for his father. I would definitely include that. I would definitely source where I got that information, which was on Ancestry. I do this a lot. I take photographs of the homes today, if they're still standing. I just got back from New England where I was taking a lot of photos of various houses, trying to figure out if they were the same house that my client's ancestor lived in. And it's interesting because I can't believe how many of them are still there. And if they're not there, I take a picture of the lot, or I take a picture of the street that they lived on. Or if there's some old buildings in town, I take pictures of those. Drawings of various fashions that were popular back then is always good. There's a lot of them that are in the public domain that you can get that you don't have to ask permission to use. And then if you have any antiques or possessions from any of the ancestors that you're going to feature in the book, include a picture of it. One of my clients had an old mop that you would stick corn husks in, and we had a picture of that in her book. You know, most people haven't seen a mop that had corn husks in it, so it's a good idea. So I'd like to hear if anyone has any picture ideas for their books, what they might be including. Is it just of the people? Man. Oh yeah.
I was able to find some items that she made, so.
That's perfect. What kind of things did she make?
Just, like, I mean, I've had them, so, like little doilies or
Perfect.
Yeah.
Something like that, it really brings the ancestor to life when you can do something like that. I don't know my great-great-grandma, but I know that when her husband died suddenly, she had to work at a cotton mill, and so I took a picture of the cotton mill, and then I learned that the cotton mill made certain bedspreads. And I'm going to try to get some pictures of that type of bedspread to include in it as well. So you can see I'm desperate for photos, but there's always a way to get something to make it more interesting. Thank you. and then we're going to talk about fonts, because that's something that Blurb's going to ask you. I think they give you a choice of 4 different fonts to use. And you may think, who cares, I'll just use whatever it looks best to me, and that's always an option. But have you heard the difference between these? That this is a sans serif font, and the other one is a serif font. And the difference is, this one is very straight, and this one has little tiny feet on it. And believe it or not, publishers have rules that they use for these. But this is really only allowed for headlines, and this is allowed for body copy. Now you can break that rule. People break that rule all the time, but it's just something to think about. If you want to make it look a little more polished, they've done studies, and for long blocks of text, it is easier to use it with the serifs, because you your mind kind of grabs onto those little feet, making it easier to read. And you often see this used for websites. So I just wanted to introduce that to you. So headlines, maybe, and then they can be used for headlines and for body copy. Okay. And I even found that it's the same case in Japanese. I didn't know that they also have sans serif, see, no feet, and then serif. And they call it fish scales instead of serif. Fish scales. So uroko. So I don't know. Is anyone planning to include any Japanese characters in their books? Yeah, maybe. So you may want to think about what font you want to use and what you want it to look like. Okay, and spacing and margins is another thing. When you start laying out your book and you start looking at it on Blurb, try to make it so your paragraph doesn't end up here out on its own with one little single line up there. It's called widows and orphans. So maybe down here there would only be one line, or up there there'd only be one line. You can fix that on Blurb. They'll try to fix that for you, but just be on the lookout for it. So it just makes it look nicer, and if someone picks it up who's a professional, they might say, oh yeah, okay, this person really made a good job of laying it out. And then Blurb will also allow you to use narrow columns or wide margins. This one has a very narrow margin, and if I had to read this, I would get really tired of being like, da 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 da. Oh, I dropped a line. Oh yeah, da 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 da. The line is just too long. So break it up. Break it up into columns if you can. Make wider margins, white space. Another thing to think about. I think that the rule is, 6 inches of copy is really all that we can handle before we start getting, our mind starts to wander. Okay, I'm really blasted through this first, but we're going to do an exercise afterwards. So, my conclusion, go ahead, is start with the end in mind. How are you going to end this book? And please write an outline, even if you're going to change it along the way. You will change it along the way. And use the outline to divide the project into bite-sized pieces. That's so you have time to work on them. When you set up your schedule and you're writing for 2 hours, you can write on something. And then when you pick it up again, you don't have to spend a lot of time backtracking to think, what did I cover last time? Okay, I'm going to write it up. This. And then set deadlines for yourself. And then cite your sources, but whatever style works for you best. And whatever style is fairly clear to the reader. And last but not least, remember this is your project. You're going to do it the way you want to do it, but hopefully I've given you some ideas of how to keep it all polished. Like that. All right.